This week in small groups, we'll be discussing generosity. There was a season of my life when I heard the word generosity and all I could hear was the word less. Can I tell you the truth? I'm not sure I'm all the way through that season yet. But with God's help, I'm recognizing more and more each day what generosity frees me from rather than what generosity takes from me. If you're reading along in the Defying Gravity book for this series, Tom Berlin describes something similar in chapter 4. Before we dive into a discussion on generosity being a learned and joyful behavior, I want to share a story. The last time I was in Malawi, a local pastor asked if I would visit the home of an elderly woman in the community and pray with her. One of her sons had passed away, her husband had left her, and she was taking care of 2 kids and her parents. Would you be willing to buy her a gift before our visit to lift her spirits, Pastor? Maybe a bar of soap. She would be so grateful, the local pastor remarked. After stopping at a market for soap, we traveled to the woman's home, a home that she built with her own hands. I entered the home and humbly offered her the soap, my condolences in the loss of her son, and prayers for God's presence to be with her. Through the pastor who translated, she thanked me for my prayers and for the soap. And then as a thank you, she insisted in joy that I take her dinner. And it wasn't an offer I was allowed to refuse or it would be an insult. This woman's home was made from the mud and dirt which surrounded it. This woman didn't have enough money to buy her own soap, and yet she thought it would be an appropriate offering to give me her meal as a thank you for being willing to pray with her. As I began to write the script for this video, I remembered this woman's generosity. I remembered what it would be like to feel like I could give like that in joy. I remembered after we left the woman's home giving that meal to the local pastor who was hungry because I knew I had plenty to eat, and then thinking to myself, I could give so much more. Why do I hold so much for myself? Each of us at some point in our lives has been impacted by generosity. It often compels us to give as well. Perhaps you have a story of when someone generously gave to you. Maybe you felt the freedom of giving without thinking of anything other than being grateful. Take a few moments to share stories with one another. I'll be back with a few more thoughts after you've gone over some discussion questions in your leader guide. Four or 5 times a year, I pull out our family budget. I spend time reviewing our inputs versus our outputs. Are there places we can trim back? Are there areas we're overspending? Each of these items has a gravity which pulls my attention toward them. I scroll to the top of the document and I see church as a line item. If I'm honest, I tell you every so often I wonder if that number is enough. Other times I wonder how much it might help to reduce that number just a little to make room for other line items. There have been times when the math, I've done it 2 or 3 or even 4 times over to see if I'd made a calculation error and what tithe was really supposed to be. Generosity, particularly as it pertains to recurring giving, is a learned behavior. I've always felt like it was natural for me to give to something in the moment. Someone needs money for a meal, bam, I'm on it. Someone's down on their luck, here I come to save the day. But it's only recently that I'm learning the fullness of the discipline required in saying yes to generosity and saying no to me. If you've ever heard me preach, I love talking about response. God gives and gives and gives. God is generous with grace, mercy, and love. God is so generous that he gave Jesus to us, not because we deserved him, but because we needed him. God has given me enough, and yet time and time again, I worry if I'll have enough to give to me too. I've been praying about what it means to give without worrying about having less, and instead dreaming about having more. More ways to say thank you, more effective ministries locally and globally, more chances to trust that God will always provide enough for what I need. Maybe not necessarily everything I want, but surely everything I need. Sometimes just taking a spiritual inventory, remembering all the things God has done for me, remembering God's faithfulness is a chance to reteach myself lessons of generosity. Practically speaking, when was the last time you sat down and thought about your response to God's endless grace? How much of your time do you devote to prayer, to being present with God and others, to witnessing to your faith, to serving your neighbor? And how much of your resources are you holding back in fear rather than releasing in joy? Do you operate like you only have so much you could possibly give to God of your time? Or do you live like you have eternity to embrace God's love so you can give all the time you can in joy? We learn generosity best by example. Christ sacrificed all for us. Take a few moments in your small group to discuss what you've received from God and how you've learned or teach others generosity. As one of your pastors, what a privilege it's been to step forward with you in faith and give my prayers, presence, witness, service, and gifts to God in joy, measuring those gifts not by what I lose, but by all that I have already gained: new life, purpose, hope,